Hello and welcome to the Heaven Bound Sunday School class at the First General Baptist Church in Truman. We're going to read a passage from the 5th chapter of Mark. Now, Mark's gospel was written before the Gospels of Matthew or Luke or John. It's a story about the man possessed with demons. Now, dealing with people can be difficult. We all know that. When others conduct themselves in difficult, rude, or unmannerly ways, it's often hard to see behind their exterior to understand why they are being difficult. Physical illness, emotional distress, any number of other causes can bring out the worst in all of us. And when we allow circumstances and situations to color our attitude, we become the difficult ones we all dread. Now, the scripture we're going to read today presents us with a very difficult person. He cannot get along with people. People try desperately to restrain him. Then Jesus arrives with help for this helpless man. He offers us a pattern for dealing with difficult people that is as valid today as it was back then. I will read the scripture, as I said, the 5th chapter in Mark, beginning in verse number 1. And they came over unto the other side of the sea into the country of the Gadarenes. And when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains, because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces, neither could any man tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. But when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshipped him, and cried with a loud voice, and said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, that thou Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. For he said unto him, Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. And he asked him, What is thy name? And he answered, saying, My name is Legion, for we are many. And he besought him much that he would not send them away out of the country. Now there was there nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding, and all the devils besought him, saying, Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them. And forthwith Jesus gave them leave, and the unclean spirits went out and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. There were about 2,000, and they were choked in the sea. And when he was come into the ship, he that had been possessed with the devil prayed him that he might be with him. Howbeit Jesus suffered him not, but saith unto him, Go home to thy friends, and tell them how great things the Lord hath done for thee, and hath had compassion on thee. And he departed, and began to publish in Decapolis how great things Jesus had done for him, and all men did marvel. Now, as Jesus and the disciples were traveling across the sea, once they reached the shoreline in an area that had approximately 10 cities stretched along that shoreline. It was primarily a Gentile area called the country of the Gadarenes. And as the ship got close to the shore, a man came running out of the hillside, and it was a man, and the scripture tells us, had an unclean spirit. Now, depending on the translation of the Bible you might be reading, it might also say an impure spirit. In either case, it basically acknowledges that there's demonic possession involved with this man. It says he lived in the tombs. They were caves up there in the hillside. That's where he lived. It says no man could bind him because of his crazy nature. I hate to use that word, but that pretty well comes to mind. It sounds, the scripture tells us, he cried out day and night. And the people didn't really want to have anything to do with him, so they came up with the idea of putting him in chains. That didn't work. He just broke out from the chains, and they tried other ways to deal with the man, and basically came up with the idea, maybe just leave him alone, leave him up there in the tombs, and they wouldn't bother him at all. Now, anyway, his combination of strength and wildness, nobody could subdue him, so the people felt like it was best just to stay away from him. Scripture even tells us that he also cut himself with stones. So I think it gives a pretty good picture of a man that had some mental issues. But then again, when he saw Jesus coming, he ran and worshiped him. He'd never seen Jesus before. Jesus had never seen this man before, but he recognized Jesus for what he was, and he cried out, it says, in a loud voice. Now, this man recognized Jesus, and he ran to worship him. And you think, had hope arrived, or have the demons recognized a threat to their very existence? And that the second is the case. True worship is motivated by genuine, sincere awareness of the greatness and goodness of God. False worship may go through the motions without offering that true awe and adoration the Lord so richly deserves. The worship included shouting in a loud voice. Everyone knew that this man declared Jesus to be the Son of God. The voice we hear is that of the demons who intend to retain their separation from the presence of the Lord and thus maintain their safety. They recognize that Jesus can and that Jesus will judge them, so they ask not to be placed in torment. They knew the power and authority of Jesus. Jesus asked the man, what is your name? And the reply was Legion, for we are many. Now, at that particular time, a Roman military unit was called a legion, and it usually consisted of 6,000 soldiers. So they were many, and they were a strong force, and they begged to not be sent from the area. They knew that Jesus was going to draw them out of this man. They didn't want to be sent away. There was a herd of pigs that was nearby, approximately 2,000 pigs, as a matter of fact, and the demons said, send us into the pigs. They rather would go into the herd of swine rather than to the darkness of the abyss. They assumed there was going to be safety there. Like so many people, these demonic forces believed they had outwitted the Lord. Now, Jesus granted the request. The pigs did not tolerate demon possession any more reasonably than the man. These demon-possessed pigs stampeded in a violent race that sent them down a steep embankment where they drowned in the water. Now, in the day of Jesus, most Jews were anxious about large bodies of water. The murky depth of deep water implied the unknown and often symbolized chaos and hell. Deep pools were often labeled as an abyss or the entryway to the abyss. The demons thought they had found safety away from the abyss by going into the pigs, only to face peril in an abyss-like environment in the depths of the Sea of Galilee. Now, shortly after this, the townspeople came out, saw that the man was dressed and in his right mind, something they hadn't seen in many, many years. So a strange reaction from the townspeople. They asked Jesus to leave the area. Now, there's several things that could bring that about. Fear, like how did he do all this? How did he get the demons out of the man? But also, there was some anger. They were upset with Jesus because of what he did. They wound up losing 2,000 pigs. So there's a loss of income from those pigs. Now, the scripture tells us that Jesus went to get on a boat after the townspeople asked him to leave. He was going to comply. The man, he wanted to go with Jesus and the disciples. He knew that a miracle had happened. He wanted to go with Jesus, and Jesus said no. He sent the man who had been possessed on a mission to go back home and tell his story. The Lord had done great things, and he needed to tell this incredible story. Perhaps reluctantly, but nevertheless obediently, the now sane, the now rational, the delivered man traveled throughout the region of Decapolis, telling his story, his personal story. Now, the story of the wild man had undoubtedly been spread among the region. And now the story of the tame man can be told to everyone's amazement. Now, just like the demon-possessed man, we've been delivered by Jesus. We too are called to share the story of what Jesus has done for us, to prepare our own communities to meet Christ and come to new life. No matter the legions aligned against us, Jesus is always in control. All we have to do is place our faith in Him with joy and obedience.